happened to the Spaniard? The mates so brave, the boast, that they shall eat the feather goose. We shall eat the roast, Halanto, Johnny Rumbelow. We were up long before the day, to welcome in the summertime, welcome in the May, for summer is a-coming in, and winter's gone away.
Tune in to International Pagan Radio. You can hear your favorite artists such as Dave the Bard, Tuatha Dea, Spiral Rhythm, S.J. Tucker, Murphy's Midnight Rounders, and many, many more. Join us for exciting shows like Ask a Witch and Storytime with Rook as well. www.internationalpaganradio.com on the net or on TuneIn Radio on your mobile devices. Join us on Facebook and Twitter too. International Pagan Radio, all pagan, all the time.
Welcome back to An Emerging Forest on the Spiritual Unity Radio Network. We hope everyone was able to stretch their legs and get a drink. And now, back to Alan.
Welcome back, everyone. And as was said in the rejoin, I hope you had a nice break. I'm really glad that Santha is on tonight. I had a wonderful first half hour of the show listening to her. And David, why don't you rejoin with your question?
Yes, thank you, Alan and Santha. I mean, my question was how. I mean, you live in the country. You're around nature all the time. You're very much one. You know, you have gardens, and the question I asked was how your involvement with nature and the outside world, how that informs your writings and your poetry.
Well, let's see how I can answer that. I did grow up I had an unusual upbringing because I did not live in a suburban area or in a city or a town. When I was a child, I lived in the forest. And my parents were working, they went deep into the forest. Well, deep by, they didn't go like 2 days walk into the Amazon jungle, but they went a quarter mile into the woods of Dutchess County, New York, out of sight of other houses, and they were building a house there. And they made by hand all their concrete blocks that they built the house out of. So when I was a child, I was involved with that process of mixing concrete and making concrete blocks by hand. and laying them and the whole construction site, and it was all surrounded by forest. So I spent a lot of time outdoors in nature as soon as I walked out my door. And when I wanted even to go to school, I had to walk out the driveway, and the driveway was a quarter mile long. So I got to see a lot of changes there. And over my lifetime, what was, when I was little, an open field with strawberries growing in it that we picked and ate, is now a forest with big trees in it. They're not like, old growth timber, but they're 8-10 inches in diameter, and they're filling up the entire area. So that was, a number of decades ago. But so as a result of not being around a lot of people, but being around a lot of nature, I really got a big relationship with nature. And I ended up doing healing work. I do healing work I'm a plant spirit medicine practitioner, and I'm a massage therapist. And my massage therapy has a big foundation in traditional Chinese medicine and 5-element Chinese medicine, which is all nature-based. Because the thing of it is that we're all living in nature all the time. The only place we can live is in nature. But the nature that I am familiar with and that I've spent a lot of time with is less tampered with by human beings than the nature in many places, many suburban areas or urban areas. And I work as a healer, and to me what I see is that the processes of nature are processes of healing. The word healing, I already wrote one poem about the word ground. I could write another word about the word healing. The word healing comes from the same Old English root as the word whole or as the word holy. So heal, whole, and holy all kind of mean the same thing. And holy, well, yours is about spirituality. Your radio show's about spirituality. And holy, to me, especially when I learned about plant spirit medicine, I was introduced to this idea that of the divine natural world, where the world is God. The world is God. This is it. We're it. It's all around us. We are in it. There's not some third-party God elsewhere, like looking down and judging us. The world is responsive. The world is interactive. And that's really what my poems are a lot about, right? As the ones I've read to you so far are about looking at those interactions. Like, I'll go on a walk in the woods and I will see an animal, and I have a reference book that I looked them up, and there's never been an occasion, ever since I started doing that, where any animal that I saw did not have a direct relationship to something that was going on in my life. Or I'll see something in the trees. Like, my eyes are just tuned in to getting answers to questions. Or I'll be working with someone in plant spirit medicine, and a certain bird will fly by, or the trees will do something. I'll notice something. It's like our eyes. It's like if you're pregnant and you, which neither of you are or will be, but I have been, and you go in a parking lot and suddenly you see all the pregnant people that you never noticed before, and all of a sudden there are many of them that there never were before. And so it's like I have even studied this when I studied ecology at Cornell University. There's a way in which, and I can't remember the details of it, but I think I still have the textbook, where our eyes kind of tune in to the information that we need. Like, there's 7,000 signals going on around us all the time, and of those 7,000, we take in like 5 or 7 or something. There's a number, I don't remember the exact number. And it's so, like, when we have a question in our hearts and we go out and look, even without knowing it, our body, mind, spirit is on the lookout for guidance. And it's out there. And when you go to nature, your question, I'm getting a little wandering off here, but if bringing it back to your question, when we go to nature that is whole, therefore more holy, the guidance that we get can be shown to us if we know how to read it. And so it's like when in writing these poems, like I wasn't even, these poems have a lot of things in them where when I saw whatever the image was that was in the poem, I wrote it down because I liked it, because it was beautiful. So I saved it. I wrote it down and I saved it. And then later on, 10 years later, 15 years later, I go back and lo and behold, in that poem, there's a word or an image which then later in my life unfolded into this whole chapter of particularly my relationship with fire, and I have a candle burning here with me now. I've mentioned to David before in some other conversations about something called the Sacred Fire Community that I've gotten involved with, and I'm not as involved with it now as I used to be, but there was this whole chapter that opened with my relationship with fire and understanding what fire is. And so it's like these poems for me are like, this is a healing journey, these 35 poems. I've read you some very beautiful ones about nature. There's some in here that are very filled with angst and very filled with misery and pain and challenges that I've encountered in my life. And once again, they also turn to nature, not only to nature outside of humanity, because really humans have this tendency to think that they are separate from and other than nature, which is not true. Like humans are part of nature. It's not possible, right? It's not true, and it's not possible. That's right. That's right.
It's in the ego, it's possible. In the ego, someone can introduce the idea to you that you are somehow on a plane above nature, and nature does the following list of things that you don't do. But that's the pathway to being to having breakage from nature and to having a wound, thinking that you are not nature. So
that's right.
Totally. That's emerging forest.
And it's very easy to do. Right. Exactly.
Very.
Yeah.
You have to be a computer or a robot to not be part of nature.
Even computers and robots are part of nature. They capitalize on it.
Right.
There's nothing that isn't part of nature. There's nothing that isn't part of nature. Even our emotions, even our beliefs. There's nothing that isn't that. So we are in nature.
We are in the container.
We are nature. Even New York City garbage dump is nature. It's all nature. Automobiles.
Yeah, because the country will come to the city. You have coyotes roaming around New York City.
Yeah, or even other than that, like some of these poems have that in them too. Here, I'll read you. Can I read you another one? Do you want to hear another one?
Please. Read my go.
All right. Let's see if I can. They're all in an order, but I have to find what order. Yeah. So this one is called September Drought. And there was a year, 10 or 15 years ago, when there was a real drought at the end of the summer. And you asked me how nature informs my poetry. Like, I'm really sensitive to my environment, to how things are. I just feel a lot. And when it gets really dry and the ground is dry, it freaks me out. It doesn't feel good. I get scared and worried because water is life. So this was a poem that I wrote one year when that was the case. It's called September Drought. Enough of riches. Now is the dry, bony time. Cold, relentless air. It wasn't warm that year. It was cold but dry. Leathery leaves, armored with lignin and dust, hang waiting, as bushmen wait, nestled in dust, for rain. We sidestep lessons in poverty and survival, to laugh at nothing, to sit still while nature settles herself molecule by molecule around us. It's more pleasant to eat beef and sit, clinking our glasses and smiling at the Madison Avenue men who promise perpetual spring. But while we sit, varroa mites are come to eat the honeybees, and skeletons of elm trees stare from the roadsides. It's time to learn what bushmen know. I'd like to say some words about how apple trees, when frost is done, burst into bloom, but I don't know. The rains don't come, and people keep on mixing things. What can you tell me about learning to sit still? And then there came another poem after that, which was November's response. Already I sit like a stone in a field or a lump of mud in a furrow melting under March rains, muscle and bone fused like fence rails, angling over stone walls across abandoned pasture lands. Perhaps what I need to do is learn to dance. Then, when my toes touched down, new life would spring forth. Where my fingers touched, leaves and blossoms would open, and lightness and grace would carry me into the air. Ah, what a dream. So this was a personal but also a natural poem, right? Like it's like this is at a time in my life when I was really, this is as I was going deeper into my body, and I was feeling all the stuck places, all the painful places, all the places that were glued together in my body, and I needed to move. So how do we be in response, to a drought? Even a drought of rain from the heavens, a drought in our relationship, any kind of drought. Here are some thoughts about what is the right response? What can you do in relationship to that when something is just dry and bony and not coming? And these were very visceral responses in me. And then, amazingly, it rained. And another poem came when it rained. And I went over to Woodstock, New York, where there's a beautiful swimming hole with a stream, and then above the stream, it's like solid bedrock, but there are little places where it's hollowed out. Mm-hmm. And so this poem came in relation to that place. And it says, in the rocky brook, pools like poems sit, each with its own rhythm and balance. Leaves play counterpoint. Autumn colors glow in the damp gray air. Water over stones sings endlessly. Rain is come, rain is come, rain is come. And there was just such a sense of relief in my body, which is, my body is nature. And so it's like nature feels. We feel nature, and nature feels us and feels everything. And these are just some of the different ways that it can feel. And so, these are some of the ways that our human responses tend to interact with the world of nature, and that's part of what my poems include. Yes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it really does capture how you bring a natural world into your writing, your own relationship with the natural world into your writing, and how they feed off each other in a sense. Right.
That's what this is an expression of. Like, this is going out into the world of nature, seeing what's going on there, feeling it, capturing it, and putting it in words so that I can then reach out into the human world with an extend into the human world to anyone who's willing to listen. That's my experience. So when I wrote for Alan in the beginning of this, I wrote, in this way, the poetry, in this way, I reach both in and out to make connection through poetry. In writing poetry, I seek to build a bridge between my inner landscape and that of my reader and listener by constructing of words a holographic image that can allow some new recognition, realization, or discovery to extend our common map of what is. In this way, I reach both in and out to make connection through poetry.
Well, it's my reaction so far is I was trying to put it into words, but I think sort of summarizing something I might have gotten from Rumi. I'm just drunk. I'm sitting here. All I'm drinking is water, and I'm drunk over the last 54 minutes of the show here. So, amazing. So let's keep going.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Alan, because it does, and you would probably agree, Santha, that poetry is perhaps the most purest form of word expression. And for those reasons that you're talking about, it goes somewhere that a story can't go, that an article can't go, that poetry is something that is intoxicating, because as you said so aptly earlier, Santha, about that words are magic spells, and it's poetry are those magic spells that you don't necessarily get from a story or an article. I just use those off the top of my head. There are other things as well, but there's something to poetry that it feels that modern society has lost the true appreciation of poetry, and I could be wrong, but it seems that way.
I know. I can feel what you're talking about. Yeah, and well, I was thinking about, like, I have pulled out here. I'm sitting here with a whole bunch of books and poems, and one of the books I got out is a book of prose. It's by T.H. White, and it's the first section of his Once and Future King book about the sword and the stone. This is a prose book, but the way he uses language is comparable or similar. It's part of, like, when I was thinking about Alan's question about whatever gave me the idea to be writing poetry, it's not like I had the idea. The poetry just are here, but the way people used to write, like thinking about the way J.R.R. Tolkien wrote, like when he described the Ents moving through the forest, or, here I'm going to read you something that is in this book. When Wart, who was King Arthur, young King Arthur, and Sir Kay went to see Robin Hood, whose real name was Robin Wood, in the forest. And they were approaching the big tree. And it says, they were indeed approaching the monarch of the forest. It was a lime tree, which is a basswood tree, as great as that which used to grow at Moor Park in Herefordshire, no less than 100 feet in height and 17 feet in girth, a yard above the ground. Its smooth, beech-like trunk was embellished with a sort of beard of little twigs at the bottom, and where each of the great branches had sprung from the trunk, the bark had split and was now discolored with rainwater or sap. The bees zoomed among the bright and sticky leaves, higher and higher towards heaven, and a rope ladder disappeared among the foliage. That's not a poem, but that's a poetical description, right? That is so similarly evocative, using words like to paint a picture. And when I was a kid, like, we read a lot of books. I read a lot of books, a lot of books where people were using language in these ways to really like paint a rich picture. And that was before television. That was before video, television. That was before movies. That's when people used to listen to radio shows. And so it would have to be the words and the sounds of the words that would call up in their minds these pictures. Or if you look at the way J.R.R. Tolkien wrote with the way J.K. Rowling writes, and they're both good writers, but there's so much richness and depth and juice in Tolkien's writing. I don't have any of his books here. I thought I need to get those books and have them in my home. That people are not accustomed to. It's like junk food. They have junk language. So that's sad for me. I feel sad about that. But, what to do about it, I don't know. I write these poems. When they come, I write them down. And I'm just so grateful and honored that you guys want to hear them and that you like them.
Well, poetry is
a blessing.
It's special. Yeah, no, it's important. It's important for people to appreciate poetry, because if you don't appreciate poetry, then there could be, there could be something missing within you or within your life, because poetry is such a pure form of expression. It really does go back to maybe the ancient myths, when people would tell stories to keep things alive, and then they would eventually write those down, because originally it was all about talking and telling stories, and then we developed writing. I believe that's correct, isn't it, Santha?
Right. One of the other books I pulled out, which is such a beautiful, beautiful inspiration to me, is the Homeric hymns. Have you ever heard of the Homeric hymns?
Well, Homer wrote the Iliad and everything, correct?
Homer wrote if he was even a person, he was maybe a person or several. But these are really ancient, and these are hymns to each of the gods and goddesses, talking about, like here's a hymn to the earth, a hymn to Artemis 1, to Artemis 2, hymns to Hermes, to Dionysus, to Aphrodite, Poseidon, Zeus, Demeter, Athena, Hestia, and so forth. I don't know how many of them there are. Apollo.
We'll read one of them.
I'll read the one to the earth, since that's the first one in the book, and since that one is... But when I hear... Yeah, let me read this. It's so beautiful. The hymn to the earth. The mother of us all, the oldest of all, hard, splendid as rock. Whatever there is that is of the land, it is she who nourishes it. It is the earth that I sing. Whoever you are, howsoever you come across her sacred ground, you of the sea, you that fly, it is she who nourishes you. She, out of her treasures, beautiful children, beautiful harvests are achieved from you. The giving of life itself, the taking of it back, to or from any man, are yours. The happy man is simply the man you favor, the man who has your favor, and that man has everything. His soil thickens, it becomes heavy with life. His cattle grow fat in their fields, his house fills up with things. These are the men who govern a city with good laws, and the women of their city, the women are beautiful. Fortune, wealth, it all follows. Their sons glory in the ecstasy of youth. Their daughters play. They dance in the flowers. They skip in and out on the grass over soft flowers. It is you, the goddess. It is you who honored them. Now, Mother of gods, bride of the sky, in stars, farewell. But if you liked what I sang here, give me this life too. Then, in my other poems, I will remember you.
Timeless.
Isn't that amazing? It's like when you read this, it's like, bomb. And it's ancient.
It's as, I mean, I know you say it's ancient, but and then David said it's timeless. And it's just, it's the themes running through that are just today.
These are poems to the gods.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The gods,
right.
The gods are the forces of the universe that operate in our lives, who have become personified in certain ways. And these gods are still existing, still like the we have, and these poems are introducing. Some of them are very long and some of them are short. They're naming. They're telling the stories of how the gods emerged. These are, like, this is real. This is how people in 650 BC, when they wrote this, they weren't, like, talking about it hypothetically. They were talking to the known deities that they understood and recognized in the world around them as deities, and they were singing hymns to them. So it's like they're
in those ancient cultures, you weren't taught to be separate from nature.
Well, they understood the world to be divine. Like, I went to Greece one time, and I went to an island called Delos, which in its time was it was really amazing, because I went, here's like one of these messages that I got, like, from the world. Because 1 week I went on a school, this was before the World Trade Center bombing, and 1 week I went on a school field trip with my kids' school to the World Trade Center to see somebody who worked their way up high in the World Trade Center. And then I went on this trip to Greece, and a week later I was in this place on the island of Delos. And on that island, it was like there were all these ruins. It had been the World Trade Center of its day. There were all these columns and these places where there had been stores and bricks, and the whole thing had been completely built up. And on that island is the cave where Apollo and Artemis were born. And that is named in these hymns, like page 149. I don't know, it might be too long to read, but no, this is long. The thing that happened was, okay, it's a lot of pages. You ready?
Why not? Let it go.
All right. The hymn to Delian.
Alan, you okay with that?
Are you okay?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. This is the hymn to Delian Apollo. So Apollo was the archer. Apollo was the, beautiful, handsome god, right? And he was born in Delos. And let me see if this goes where I think it goes, because I want to make sure that I'm not. Wait a minute. Yes.
Well, if it doesn't
so
go
I went
where you
to this
think
island.
it's going.
I went to this. What?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
What were you asking?
No, I was just going to say, if it doesn't go where you think it goes, when you see it doesn't go there, just stop talking and stop reading, and we'll do something else.
It does go where I think it goes. It's about this island called Delos, which is a real island in the Cyclades Islands of Greece, where I went to visit. So he's Delian Apollo because he was born on Delos. I will remember, I will not forget, Apollo, the archer, goes through this house of Zeus, and he makes the gods tremble. They get up. They all get up from their seats when he comes in, when he pulls back his bright bow. Only Leto waits. She waits alone next to Zeus, who so enjoys the thunder. She unstrings the bow and closes the quiver. She takes the equipment off those powerful shoulders with her hands and hangs it on a gold hook against a pillar of this, his father's house. Apollo is the son of Zeus and Leto. She leads him over to a seat, and then she seats him. It is nectar, then, that his father gives him in a gold cup. He welcomes his son, while the other gods have him sit down there. And the lady, Leto, is happy. The son she made is strong and an archer. Be happy, Leto. The children you made are glorious. The Lord Apollo and Artemis, whose pleasure is in arrows. You made her in Ortygia, him in the crags of Delos, as you lay down on that vast reach of the Cynthian hill close to the palm tree and the waters of the Inopus. That palm tree is there. I have a picture of my daughter sitting under it. How then am I to sing about you, open as you are to every kind of song? Everywhere, Phoebus is another word for Apollo, all the divisions of song are directed toward you, on the mainland that raises our cattle and on the islands. All the mountaintops please you, all the promontories of rising hills, the rivers heading out to sea, the beaches and strands that lean toward the sea, they all please you. Am I to sing how Leto first bore you, the joy of mankind, lying against Mount Cynthus on that craggy island in Delos that the sea surrounds, while a black wave on both sides pushed out onto the land, in winds that blew in shrill, and how when you got up you began your rule over everyone, to all the people of Crete, to the city of Athens, to the island of Aegina and Euboea, famous for its ships, Aegae and Erysiae and Peparethus on the sea, to Thracian Athos and the high reaches of Pelion, to Thracian Samos and the dark hills of Ida, to Skyros, to Phocaea, to the steep hills of Autocane, to that beautiful place Imbros, to the inaccessible Lemnos, and to wealthy Lesbos, the home of Makar, who was a son of Aeolus, to Chios, the brightest island that lies in the sea, to the rocks of Mimas, to the high reaches of Corycus, and to that glitter of Claros, and to the steep hill of Essagia, and to wet Samos and the sheer heights of Mycale, to Miletos, to Kos, the city of Meropian men, to high Cnidos and windy Carpathos, to Naxos and Paros, and to rocky Rhenea. To all these places she came, Leto, in labor pains, for the god who shoots so far, to see if any of these lands would want to make a home for her son. But they were scared. They all trembled. None of them, even the richest of them, none of them dared take in Phoebus, Apollo, until the lady Leto went up to Delos and spoke these winged words to her Delos, and addressed her. Delos, if you would be willing to be the home of my son, Phoebus Apollo, if you would be willing to make a good temple for him, and nobody else, by the way, is even going to touch you, nor do I think you're going to be big in cattle and sheep. You're not going to have good vintages. You're not going to produce many plants at all. But if you have the temple of Apollo who shoots so far, all kinds of men will head here, bringing their hecatombs, and the great smell of sacrifice will ascend from here forever. And you'll feed the people who live here out of the hands of foreigners. Your own soil, after all, is not very good. That is what she said. And Delos was overjoyed and answered her. She said, Leto, the most glorious daughter of great Coeus, I would receive your child, the Lord who shoots so far, gladly. It is only too true that I am terribly hated by people, but this way I would become very highly honored. But there's this saying that I'm worried about, and I won't hide it from you, Leto. They say that Apollo is going to be very arrogant and lord it over gods and mortal people everywhere on earth. Now, what I'm really afraid of in my heart and in my mind is that as soon as he sees daylight, he'll simply scoff at this island. I really am, after all, a rocky place. And then he'll turn me upside down and push me into the depths of the sea with his feet, and then great waves of the ocean will wash over my head forever. He'll go away to some other land, one that will please him, and there he'll build his temple and shaded groves. And then creatures with many feet will make their lairs in me. Black seals will make their homes in me with no worries for them at all, because I won't have any people. But, Goddess, if you would be so bold as to swear a great oath that he'll build a very beautiful temple here first, one that would be an oracle for men, and then later on he could build temples and shaded groves for everybody else, because he'll certainly be very famous. That is what Delos said. And Leto swore this great oath of the gods. Now listen to this, earth, and the broad sky above us, and Styx running your water downward. This is the biggest and most terrible oath that exists for the blessed gods. Phoebus will certainly have his fragrant altar and his precinct here forever, and he will honor you above everybody else. And when Leto had sworn and finished her oath, Delos was very happy indeed about the birth of the Lord who shoots so far. But Leto suffered. For 9 days and 9 nights she was subjected to unimaginable pain. And all the goddesses were there, all those who were important, Dione and Rhea and Ignea and Themis and Amphitrite, who groaned so loud, all the immortal ladies except Hera with her white arms. She sat in the halls of Zeus who gathers the clouds. Only Eileithyia hadn't heard, who is herself in charge of a woman's pain. She was sitting on top of Olympus under gold clouds, a result of Hera's trickery. Hera kept her away through envy, because Leto, with her beautiful hair, was about to give birth to a perfect and powerful son. So they sent Iris out of that solid island to go get Eileithyia, and they promised her a great necklace fitted with gold thread 9 cubits long, and they told Iris to call her aside from Hera, in case Hera might later discourage her from going with her talk. And when Iris, whose feet are as fast as the wind, heard all this, she started running and quickly covered the whole distance. And when she got to the home of the gods, steep Olympus, right away she called Eileithyia out of the hall to the door, and she spoke winged words to her, everything that the goddesses who live on Olympus told her to. And it cut to the heart in her dear breast, and they went away on feet that were like shy doves. And when Eileithyia, who was in charge of a woman's pain, reached Delos, the labor pain seized Leto, and she yearned to deliver. She threw her arms around the palm tree and knelt on the soft meadow. The earth laughed underneath her, and the child jumped out toward the light. All the goddesses started cheering. Then the goddesses washed you, great Phoebus, purely, thoroughly, with good water, and they wrapped you in a white cloth that was new and fine spun, and they attached a gold band. But Apollo, who carries a gold sword, was not given his mother's breast. Instead, Themis, with her divine hands, poured nectar and lovely ambrosia, and Leto was happy because the son she made was strong and an archer. And yet, Phoebus, once you had tasted that heavenly food, the gold cords could no longer hold you, nor could the bonds restrain you, and everything came undone. And right away Phoebus Apollo spoke to the goddesses. The lyre and the bent bow are always going to be loved by me, and I will reveal to mankind the exact will of Zeus. And when he said this, Phoebus, the god with long hair who shoots so far, started to walk on the earth that is wide with roads. And all the goddesses were astonished. And Delos covered herself all in gold, looking at the child of Zeus and Leto, and happy, because the god chose her instead of the other islands or the mainland to be his home. And she loved him even more in her heart, and she blossomed like a mountaintop in the flowers of its wood. And you yourself, Apollo, silver bow, shooting so far, you yourself went walking now on the steep Cynthus, and you wandered around the island and the people in them. You have many temples, many shaded groves, and all the mountain peaks are dear to you. All the sheer cliffs of high mountains, all the rivers running to the sea are loved by you. But it's in Delos, Phoebus, that you really enjoy yourself. The Ionians in their long robes assemble there with their children, with their shy wives, for your sake. And they remember how much they delight you with their boxing and their dancing and with singing whenever they hold their festival. Someone who just happened to see the Ionians gathered there would think they were immortal, because they would never die, because he'd see their grace, all of them, and it would please his heart to look at the men there and the beautifully dressed women, their fast ships and their many possessions. And then there's this wonderful thing, too, whose fame will never perish. The girls of Delos, the servants of him who shoots so far, when they have sung their hymns to Apollo and then to Leto and Artemis, whose pleasure is in arrows, they sing a hymn that recalls men and women of the past, and they charm the races of man. They know how to imitate the sounds and the chattering of all mankind. Each man would think that he was himself making the sounds for their beautiful song, is that carefully put together. But come now, Apollo and Artemis, be gracious, and farewell, all you women. Remember me later on, when someone of the men of earth finds himself here, a stranger who has suffered a lot, and he says to you, "Oh, girls, who is the sweetest man that comes here with his songs for you? Who is it that pleases you the most?" Then all together answer him, "A blind man. He lives in rocky Chios with all his songs, and all his songs will still be the best at the end of time. And we will carry your fame wherever we go on the earth, to all the civilized cities of man, and they will believe too, because it is true. And I will never forget Apollo, who shoots so far, singing hymns for Silver Bow, whom Leto gave birth to with her beautiful hair."
Beautiful word.
Yeah.
Well spoken too. You do very nice spoken health words.
Yeah. The that's like the interrelationship between the humans and the nature and the gods,
mm-hmm.
right? As it was understood. And as you can feel it in that poetry. There's no question about it for the people
mm-hmm.
whom Homer was writing for and to the entire world. You can feel it so unbroken, so holy in the world of 650 BC or 500 BC when these poems were written. That's how people understood the universe to be. And so it's like when I write, it's a place that I come from personally, but it's not a place that the entire culture that I live in comes from.
No, people 650 BC wouldn't be so arrogant as to drill into the Alaskan frontier for oil. They wouldn't be so arrogant as to just do whatever they can to stretch natural resources or put concrete over everything, so any kind of natural wetland that absorbs water doesn't exist anymore, and everything just floods because we have to have concrete.
So they weren't consuming the world in the same way, but in a way,
right.
the roots of the way that we do consume the world was also there, present in that time, because there were very much fewer people in mm-hmm. that world, and so they didn't understand. Like, for example, Troy, I think it's mm-hmm. Troy, which is I may be mistaken, but over on there's Greece, which comes down into the Mediterranean. There's Italy, mm-hmm. and then there's like Yugoslavia, and then there's Greece, and it's going down into the Mediterranean, and then there's the Aegean Sea, which is on the eastern side of Greece, and then the shoreline goes down again, and there's Turkey. And in Turkey, in what is on the Turkish side of that, I think Troy was, if I'm not mistaken about my geography, but the harbor, it was one of the major ancient cities, and the harbor, it was on the seacoast. And as a result of their agricultural practices, there's been so much in that part of the world, because they weren't aware of, doing what we call, I forgot the name. See, I'm thinking in my poetry head now, not in my agriculture head, but contour plowing. So contour plowing means you don't plow up and down the hills. You go along the hills, and then when your plow turns over the soil, every furrow is like a little dam, so that when it rains, those dams hold the water, and the water soaks in and penetrates the soil. But they didn't know about that, and it's easier with a horse or an ox to just go straight in a straight line up and down the hill. But when you do that, you're making a furrow that conducts the water straight down, and when it conducts it straight down, it carries the soil with it. And as a result, now in modern times, that place that was a harbor is now 10 miles from the sea as a result of eroded soil. So these people, it's just that the seeds of this way of being in relationship to the world were present in that time, but it hadn't gotten to that stage yet, because they didn't have, it was the Bronze Age. They didn't have iron.
Right.
And so they were, the technology, but the roots of rationalism were in Athens. And this whole way of, if we look at different poetry, I don't have it here with me right now, but there's some poetry from our continent, and there's an author that I like who talks about the poets. There were two men called Gondel and Sky. They were of the Haida people, who lived in what is called the Queen Charlotte Islands off the coast of western North America, 100 miles from like Vancouver or Seattle, out in the middle of the ocean. And those people lived there. And I happen to have a book which is some epic poems of those people that were captured and transcribed by an anthropologist who went there in the early part of the 1900s as that culture was being completely demolished. And so that's like a contrasting voice, and the man who transcribed those and published them, his name is Robert Bringhurst, and he compares those two who were They were storytellers of their people, as Homer was, and he says these people were comparable to Homer. Like the Homeric mythology is just one mythology, and there are other mythologies that are equally potent and equally essential, and they're all local to unique to their locality, just like Apollo and Artemis, the gods of the Greeks, were born on a Greek island. That exists everywhere. But the thing is, so much of it in North America is lost, and we're living out of stories that come from a whole different universe of the old world. And, our Christian stories about Jesus, well, Jesus was living in Palestine, and it was really dry there, and it's a whole different thing. So, I'm really interested to capture shreds of the poetry and the myth and the story and the history that's indigenous to the place where I live. actually I know a man who's a historian of that, and he's going to come here in a couple of weeks and tell us some new things he's learned. And because we inhabit landscapes, we live in nature. I have a poem about that too. Oh, I have so many poems. Can I read you another one of my own, or do you have more questions? Or
no, please go ahead.
All right. And I have one that I wrote when I went to Delos, which is an interesting one too. I'd love to read that to you too, but since I'm on this thread, let me do this. This is there is a children's camp in Maine that I attended as a child. Was owned by some people in my family or friends of my family. And when I went back 25 years later, this poem came. It's called On Revisiting Blueberry Cove 25 years later. It is amazing to me how every square foot, every inch even, of earth is sacred and individual, as unique and sacred and individual as our people. We are not taught to know this, though when the workers come through to cut down our trees and blast holes in our earth, we suddenly remember. By the shore they sit, not just some boulders, but those boulders, gazing out over the same water with the same eyes as they were the day I left. You have seen them every day, and so grown perhaps not to see them. And there, 3 feet in front of that phone pole, on top of the ancestors of those grass blades, that's where they teased me when they saw my underwear in the laundry, and I give back a sharp reply. And here's where we danced with scarves that time, at this end of the hall, between these windows. All those things weren't here that day. And on that place, about 10 feet from the cabin wall, Josh ran by, as I stuck my head from the window and sang, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. Poor Josh. Those are the hooks from which my bed hung. That's where I sat with Ed Bly and was nervous but interested in what he was saying. This is where I stood when I rinsed the dishes. Incidental memories all, not profound, and yet they are caught somehow in the neural fishnet, and there they remain, floundering and flopping, setting up reverberations which echo in ways that will never be understood. Perhaps the message taught to me by this earth was, you too can do it. In any case, I can see that it is wrong to travel over the surface of the earth as though one place is the same as another. Clearly, they are not. And we don't even know what the places are. We don't even know what the places are. And, you know, in the indigenous language of the people who live here, where I live, in the Wappingers people, the names of places are named to invoke or evoke stories that are teaching stories. So if somebody, like, and this man, Evan Pritchard, perhaps you'd like to come up for this, David. You might really be interested. Or Alan, either one of you. They name, so if something happened somewhere, somebody did something really foolish and stupid, and they had to pay the price of their foolish actions, and somebody is like preparing to repeat that same mistake, other people in that community would simply mention the name of that place, and it would like, oh, so-and-so is at this place with this name. That reminds everybody of a certain story or a certain set of rules. Just as in that Homeric hymn, people are reminded of, you know, things that happened in a place and what it means to honor the gods and what it means to be respectful and what is needed. So that kind of information, it's like those words that hold so much are in names of places here. And in a way, this Blueberry Cove place holds stories for me. But they're not community-wide, culture-wide stories. They're just personal stories, or there may be some that are stories that are common to people who attended that camp. So it's really a big loss. It's a, you know, we're talking about heal, whole, holy. It's a place where there's an HOLE, whole, instead of a WHOLE. The WHOLE, whole, is missing something, and there's a HOLE, whole, in it.
Yeah.
So our American culture, if one wishes to call it that, doesn't have the background of cultural grounded lessons that would profit to be anything other than, to use a phrase, the lowest common denominator. The child without rules. The child without rules. Whereas because the American conqueror came in and looked at the quote unquote savage tribes and said, well, we can't conquer them because they have stories and teachings of ethics that won't go away, so we need to destroy them and bring in clients of displaced British and etc. European cultures, but over periods of generations, will strip away the tales that they would have been given even if they lived in Europe, which would have given them a certain level of cultural guidance, because Europe certainly doesn't have deep, like super deep cultural guidance, but they have a heck of a lot more than the United States does.
Well, they do.
The
people in Europe are indigenous to where they are. And the people in America are mostly not. There are indigenous people here, but mostly not so much. So our conversation is really moving into talking about living in place. Like David's question about how do we, how are these poems connected with nature, are just winding us down into a spot about what does it mean to live in place. And really, my poetry is a lot about that, because my roots are in one place. So I have ancestral roots going back only to my grandmother in 1932, but that is a long time for most modern American culture.
And it's an interesting.
So to have people in the
It's an interesting seeding and fertilization of this emerging forest that is taking place tonight, where I've recognized for some time that it's about living in one area and having one's entire fertility be in that area and not in another area, because your seed came here. You are about this area. You're not about displaced other areas, because there was a piece of an idea that came to me that I posted the other day, which is bloom where you're planted. And there's so much. I'm going to go to Hawaii, or I'm going to go to Costa Rica, or I'm going to go someplace else. And every time I try to think about doing that, it's like, no, you're here.
Doesn't feel right.
I mean, I know you. I know where you live, sort of, and I know where David is from, sort of, but I'm from the swamp. I'm from this place, and I was born in Syracuse, New York, which I'm not sure. I don't feel like I'm from. I mean, I identify really strongly with some silly movie or silly concept called Swamp Thing, because I really identify with this this churning compost heap of a place that has this this concrete eyesore called a city on it, instead of and doesn't function as it should because of that. So I'm I don't know. I guess I have this radio show to feed myself, and other people come and other people come and are fed by it and have fun, but I'm starting to realize that the things I build are not for other people. And it's really funny, because I'm turning them around and saying, okay, Alan, let's be honest. You've built a house and you have other people come and you're serving them, but no, let's be honest, you're serving yourself. And I'm not going to shy away from saying this has really been. There's momentum. Another dear friend who lives in the forests just west of Santa Cruz, amongst the redwoods, and she loves her redwoods immensely. That's why she drives an hour each way to get to work, because she wants to come back home and be among the redwoods. She basically, I even forgot my train of thought. I'm having too much fun, and I'm continually amazed at what's going on.
Well, so you are from, where are you? I don't even know where you are right now. Where are you? I'm just across the river from Philadelphia, in Collingswood, New Jersey. So I'm in an area that should be a functioning end of a waste system for a wetland.
Small,
like a.
I'm in what should be a wetland, and it's not. And nature shaketh her fist at this debauchery, right?
But the thing is, you've been there long enough to know that. You know that about it.
Man can place his homes in other areas which are not as fragile as this one. This is an area that can't be stepped on as much as other areas can be stepped on. But man is totally backward and says, oh, we can just concrete and asphalt over large expanses of the fragile areas, and the more rocky areas where we could live and could have homes of equal population with much less impact, those we will stay away from.
Well, how can we survive without another Starbucks or Walmart?
There are reasons why everything falls where it does and how it does for some reason. There's always something that made it land like that. So but the thing is, you are a person who's there. You're a person who makes a radio show. Maybe you're a person who is interested in learning about it and who has lived there long enough and has an open-minded willingness to know about it. So that is all to the good. That is the that's the ingredients. My sister grew up here where I am now, in Dutchess County, New York, about 80 miles north of Manhattan, and in the Hudson Valley, and she now lives in Pittsburgh. And it's amazing because she has the same environmental concerns that I do. We were raised in the forest, and we were raised with like a big care for nature. And so living in Pittsburgh, and she's in an academic family. Her husband is an atmospheric chemist, and she actually has a PhD in astronomy. But she has started something called sustainability salons. And she, once a month, invites someone to her home, and they speak on some topic to do with sustainability. Like she has a rooftop garden on her house, and she has solar panels on her house, and she has a Russian stove, a masonry heater, in her home, so she heats a lot with wood. It helps, and all these things. And so once a month, and because she travels in those academic circles, she can get some very interesting speakers, and people have been coming, and she's been doing this for, 5 or 10 years, a long time, once a month. And now somebody who has attended those sustainability salons is from Saudi Arabia, and she's invited to go to Saudi Arabia to this university that's like a breath of fresh air in the Muslim culture, where they've built this whole university that's like energy efficient. And like a whole town, or basically a village, that is this university that's energy efficient, certified. There's something called LEED certified, which means
right.
I don't remember what the meaning of it is, but and women in there don't have to wear burqas, and they can drive cars inside that university, and so on. And they have invited her to go there and talk about her sustainability salons and tell them about how she is an environmental activist in Pittsburgh. And she's like on the board of this thing called GASP, which is like about air quality, better air quality in Pittsburgh. And this is just out of her own, as you said, her own desire to be where she is and make it better and raise awareness and consciousness there. And I'm just like so floored by looking at what one person, what the effects of one person's life can be. It can be huge. Yeah. And so when the first step is the awareness.
It's the thirst. First is the awareness and the thirst, and basically saying, I want to know. I don't want to know from the perspective that I know it. I want to know. I want to know from all perspectives. I don't want to know some way that I have to put my hand over my one eye and stand on one leg. No, I want to know the whole picture so that I can really understand. LEED is actually LEED, and it's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it's a rating system devised by the United States Green Building Council to evaluate environmental performance of a building and encourage and market transformation towards sustainable design. And the commercial that I've just given for the United States government was paid for by I don't know who. So,
but the thing is, this Saudi Arabia university has built their entire campus based on that set of standards.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they are saying we don't have to go the way that everyone. They're in the middle of Saudi Arabia. They're just saying we can do this a different way.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the important thing, is finding new ways to do things and not being tied to what other people have done or what the status quo is. It's like having your own little mini inner revolution, and then that spreads. So if you can have your own revolution within yourself, and then you can take that and other people can, it becomes synergistic.
Yeah.
Well, it's the inner revolution, and I speak from my own inner revolution, was to say, my vision is important. It's important to me, and it's important to recognize that I'm not here for someone else, that I'm here for me. That's sort of egotistical, but it's also right, because I'm not here for David and I'm not here for Santha. I'm here for me. I'm here to further my adventure. I'm here to further my adventure, and I'm literally here to serve myself. But who is myself? Myself is a being who wants certain experiences. So to be able to say I am serving myself, and to be able to say I am self-serving is frowned upon in this culture. But it's actually what we're here to do, is to serve ourself. Because ourself, in my perspective, from how I believe things are, ourself is a being who wishes to experience what it wishes to experience. It is, you could call it God. It is a God who wants the thing that you want next. You don't know why you want it next, but you want it next for the being who wants it next, which is yourself.
Right, because your life is the life that you have to live. You have to live your own life, and you have to live. You have to be who you are.
And it's it's all improvisation. There's no script. You know, seriously, think about it.
Literally, I need to say one thing here. The one thing that I need to say here is we've got 10 minutes left before the program is going to kick us out. So this has been a wonderful hour and 10 minutes of a program, and so we will figure out how and when you're coming back, and if you're coming back in this type of hello. You're coming back. Yeah. No, there was some frogs or something going on. I don't know what that was.
Oh, I have my house makes music. No, my house makes music when the wind blows.
Oh.
It's a funny sound thing that happens. Yeah.
Okay.
I
knew something was going on. That was like the god of the wind was speaking there. Sort of giving homage to our creation of the last 110 minutes. This has been a very wonderful episode of An Emerging Forest. I don't know whether I'm going to get to bed before 2 a.m. I'm so charged by this. And there are many things that I'm going to write you emails about, and things to figure out for future interactions. Thank you so much for being patient with previous interactions where we had some skinned knees on a previous attempt at a show. And how do you wish to be contacted as a result of this show? Do you want direct contact? Do you want people to send me emails, and then I'll send you emails forwarded, or how do you want to work that? Do you want to give out a direct contact, or just through me?
If anyone wants to reach me, let's see. Do you have a preference?
I don't care.
Do you want to be in the middle between that?
if you
I
want
do have one more poem.
Well,
I do have one more poem I want to end with. But
okay.
If you want to give people my email, we can.
Let's do that. Let's do this first, and then we'll end with a poem.
Okay. It's fine if anyone wants to email me. They can send me an email to my email address, which is santhaCooke @gmail.com.
And I'd just like to once again say my name is Alan Ritter. I'm the host of An Emerging Forest here on SURN. And thank you so much to Terry and Robin, and best wishes to the grantors of this space for me to have an emerging forest. My name is Alan Ritter, and my email address is RITTER.ALAN88 @gmail.com. And David, do you want to give your contact information?
Sure, Alan. It's DWHITMAN0906 @gmail.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Next week is the second episode of hosting singer-songwriter Laurie Cagno. The following week is a great episode with the director of the Rotunda in Philadelphia, Gina Renzi, being our guest. And I wish everyone to go out and be in their passion and serve themselves, serve their self with a clear conscience. And we're going to end with the poem by Santha, and then I'll play the closer. So lead us to the closer, Santha.
Okay. Well, I wanted to include this poem because we just read a whole long Homeric hymn to the Delian Apollo, the Apollo that was born in Delos, the island of Delos in the Greek Cycladic Islands. And this is a poem that I wrote when I visited Delos, and I saw a lot of what they call kouros. The kouros are those statues of the male, like athletes. That's the name of those sculptures. They're called kouros. And it's so interesting that our conversation kind of went to the same place that this poem also goes. So I think this is the place where this poem belongs in our conversation. So the name of it is called Kouros Delos. And here it is. Here stand the mute remains of a world still living in another time and place, charged with power in ancient times, hovering at the edge of motion, erect, alive, engaged in every moment. To reach, to grasp, to leap, to throw would be their joy. Eyes open to see, mouths poised to speak, to smile, to laugh, bodies alert, to hold the stimulus, the response, open faces meeting the moment. They cry to us, they plead with us, they beseech us to put aside fear, defeat, despair, to stride with passion into life, that they may feel once more that thread of fire burning in their veins. That was what those sculptures looked like to me. It looked like there they were in marble, they were stopped. And what they wanted from us was exactly what you were just saying, Alan. They wanted us to stride with passion into life, into our own lives, to live from passion, to live from movement, to live from engagement, following our own truth, following our own inner guide with what is true for us, and as you said, with a clear conscience, not to just be a consumer, but to be someone who's engaged. That was what those kouros sculptures said to me so strongly. So I just think it's interesting that we arrived at that same point ourselves in our own conversation, and that this poem really is speaking that same message.
Thank you, Santha.
Good night, all. I don't have anything more to add. Have a great week. See you next Sunday.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Spiritual Unity Radio Network. Join us 7 nights a week for exciting programming covering a variety of expressions of faith. And remember, all manifestations of the divine are equally valid.